Hello and welcome to the next in our series of fireside chats, and I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by the Reverend Deacon Peter Batten, Deacon in the Uniting Church of Australia and Mission Resource Minister in the Presbytery of Gippsland, and Jenny Batten, who, having handed in her last essay today, is a fully qualified spiritual director and also the director of the Threshold Choir and various other pop-up choirs in and around the Cathedral Church here at St Paul's. So welcome to you both, and wonderful to have a chat with you. And thank you, Peter, so much for your preaching today at the pre-recorded Eucharist, and for introducing us to Awesome. We might talk about your shared love of the arts and puppeteering as part of that in a moment. But I love the way that you teased out that really, really important gospel text around forgiveness and reconciliation, which is not just an aspect of the gospel, is it? It's at the very heart and essence of the gospel, reconciliation. And what I found so helpful was your honesty around why that is difficult for us, and the challenge of forgiveness, both in the giving and the receiving. And I was thinking as you were speaking about one of my favourite French philosophers, Jacques Derrida, who speaks about the gift that is at the heart of forgiveness. And the gift kind of crashes through our economies of exchange. A gift can only be given and received. It can't be earned, and it can't be responded to in a transactional way. Is that part of what makes us vulnerable in the giving and receiving of forgiveness, do you think? Because we really like to be in control, don't we? And if we're getting something, we want to have earned it, and we like to be able to, repay a gift, but a gift's not repayable.
I think that's right. I think that forgiveness is a gift, both giving and receiving, and as I said this morning, in self-forgiveness as well, to give that gift to yourself. And I think the difficulty is actually recognising that in doing that, the vulnerability comes from the other person because you're not sure what response you're going to get. And also in your own vulnerability of holding that mirror up to yourself, and to seek forgiveness is very much an admission that I have done wrong. And there's a vulnerability in that admission because, as you rightly said, we like to be as humans in control and power. And I think that's what makes it so countercultural when you get to that true forgiving state of recognising that you either, forgiveness, I think, is just as much as being able to move on as it is being able to hug the person and be best buddies for the next decade or whatever. But to acknowledge that within self and within the other person is a huge challenge of real forgiveness. It's easy to say, I forgive you, and then go on with life, but to actually seek true reconciliation and justice in the gospel sense is just very, very hard work.
Yes, it is, and you talked about those 4 very practical steps, and one of which was reparation. And of course, in our post-Royal Commission context, as the Church comes to grips with the shame and the horror of child sexual abuse, and our kind of taking responsibility, another one of the steps for our structural sinfulness in that, our failure to protect. And as we seek to make appropriate reparation and redress, I think, the ministry that you share in the space of supervision, Peter in your case, and spiritual direction, Jenny in your case, is really central to that work, isn't it? That hard work of true reconciliation, whereby we can hold up that hard mirror and look ourselves in the eye, and then take appropriate steps to repair damage and to prevent future damage. So I want to draw you out a little bit, Jenny, on your ministry in spiritual direction. Just tell us a little bit about it, and tell us why you have such a heart for it and why you think it's so important in the life of the church.
Probably I have a heart for it and passion for it out of my own lived experience of getting to a point in my life after 40 years of teaching, recognising, oh God, what else can I do? Is there more to my life? What do you want me to do? And it was a spiritual director who led me in a pathway to discerning about what that direction might look like. So in my now, 5 years later, after completing a master's in therapeutic arts practices, which allowed me to use the arts as an expression of where I want to go or what I want to do or what God is leading me into, as well as a 4-year formation process of with the Living Well Centre in Melbourne, becoming a spiritual director. And so the passion for me is looking for ways that God can speak to us, and not just in words. It can be through a gesture, it can be through a marking on a piece of paper, or it can be through the words of a beautiful song or a piece of music. And so for me, the passion has become enlivened and enriched as the time of that my own discernment in looking for my own pathway, and now being of service to others through this ministry.
Thank you. And it's a great service, and we need more qualified supervisors in the region, because we're trying to encourage all clergy to be under supervision. Indeed, it will be mandated in the fullness of time, but it is certainly best practice. And Peter, your spiritual direction and supervision are kind of different aspects of the same sort of work, aren't they? And Peter, you're more in the supervisory space with a therapeutic kind of lens to that. Tell us what you see as the kind of differences between supervision as against spiritual direction, say.
I think supervision is very much about best practice. I think it's about sitting with the supervisee and hearing their stories, in this case in ministry, how they're going in ministry, what are some of the issues that they're facing in terms of practical day-to-day, whether it's congregational life or wherever their ministry is being expressed. Being able to ask the questions coming from a slightly different angle than some out-of-the-box questions. And similarly to Jenny's spiritual direction, coming both from the same creative arts therapeutic training, I too would engage in art making as a way of engaging through the spiritual direction, because often words in both spiritual and supervision are not enough. And when you start doing a movement or doing some art making on paper or making marks on paper, it often can reveal more about the person than what words can. And I think spiritual direction, for me, the difference is that it's more about discernment. I think spiritual direction about discerning what God is calling you to currently, where you've been, and on into the future. And ministry practice certainly comes into that, so there's a parallel there as well. But I think in their pure forms, the supervision is very much about the ministry practice, and spiritual direction is about where God is calling you to, and how that's evolving.
That's very helpful. So there's kind of overlap. There's that mandala in the middle, which is the common space. But in a sense, perhaps that's around the processing of our stories and our experience, with a view to clearing the pipes for vocation or discernment, or in the case of supervision, making sure that our stuff doesn't get in the road of other people's stuff, which is so important. And obviously that you both gather that around this passion that you share for the arts, and we saw that a little bit today, Peter, in your sermon with Awesome's appearance, and you've also done some clowning with us in the cathedral before, which is fabulous. And Jenny, you've recently started up a choir called the Threshold Choir, which has got a very particular ministry. Tell us a little bit about that.
This is gathering people together to sing for those who are in palliative care or in need of song or need of healing through song. And it's the Threshold Choir started in America about 20 years ago. So there's quite a network of choirs all over the world now. And in Australia we have them in Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, and now Sale. And I started this choir about 12 months ago. And we sing a cappella, which means we don't have an accompaniment. And we sing either in unison or in harmony, up to 3 or 4 part harmony. And it's like a lullaby. So it's a gentle singing. And the repertoire that we use is written specifically for this work. So they are short, repetitive songs that hold a secular holding of a person in this place of rest. And so, some of our songs one song is just called Rest Easy. And that's all the 2 words that are in this song is Rest Easy. And another song may be about finding peace and resting in the blessing of being in a place of peace. And it's a gentle work, and I've actually had the privilege here of singing by myself when I've had the opportunity to go into the hospital with Susanna to those patients who are at this point of nearing the end of their life, and singing to them these songs very quietly and gently.
What a precious, tender ministry, and
it is.
I love the word lullaby. It's around that liminal space between wakefulness and sleep. The great mystery of that passing over.
And it has a mystery about it too, because it provides a healing in ways beyond our imagination and understanding.
And can anyone join the
They can.
Threshold Choir? You're rehearsing on Zoom, I gather, at the moment?
We are every Wednesday night at the moment, so which has been challenging for some of the choir members who are not familiar with the technology, but and it's not easy to sing together. However, we can sing with each other through this cyberspace. And
presumably people watching could contact Susanna and get some details about that.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I feel so blessed, to have come to the Diocese of Gippsland at a time when there have also been some turnover in the leadership of the presbytery in the area, and to have started alongside such wonderful ecumenical colleagues as yourselves. For Anglicans watching who might not understand what a presbytery is or how it functions, they might not understand what a diocese is either. But what tell us a little bit about that polity and the way that kind of leadership is kind of shared and distributed in your tradition.
So Victorian Synod, which is all Victoria and Tasmania, was divided up into 5 presbyteries, Gippsland being one of the largest, but also both northeast and northwestern of the state are quite large. Each presbytery would have a chair of presbytery. It would be not dissimilar from your position. And then working alongside the presbytery team is a presbytery administrator, Deb By in our case, and Jenny and Arnie are presbytery ministers as well. Their responsibilities are strategic and pastoral care, and then I come in as the mission and education across the presbytery. So all of our presbyteries have a similar structure. So there's a chair of presbytery and then presbytery ministers that are working within the leadership of the presbytery.
So that ministry of oversight, in a sense, that ecclesial ministry is a shared one.
It's a shared ministry. In Gippsland, we've because we're such a large presbytery, and diocese is pretty much the same sort of geographical size as Gippsland, we've created teams across the presbytery based on the fig tree parable, where Jenny, Arnie and myself are responsible for a couple of teams within the presbytery, and that team includes ordained and non-ordained folk. So for me, team is one of my teams is the Currawong team, which is Sale, Maffra, Hayfield and Stratford.
Yep.
And so I work with the ministers and the congregations in there as doing strategic thinking and responsible for some pastoral care. And we've put that in process, these teams across the presbytery. Now, not all presbyteries done that. That's fairly unique to Gippsland. Previously, you'd have the presbytery ministers be responsible for pastoral care, mission, and admin, and they'd be responsible across the presbytery.
Yeah.
I still have mission and educational responsibilities across the presbytery, but as well as the focus on these two teams that I'm involved in. So it's quite a new way of thinking across presbyteries. Some would say, out of our Methodist tradition, it's a bit like going back to the old circuit days.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But it's working really, really well, and I guess one of the blessings from my point of view from Gippsland is that Jenny and Arnie and myself and Deb pretty much started at the same time. We sort of came in with permission to be agents of change, and it's always nice. There's bumpy roads being change agents, but it's really given us permission to work with the rest of the presbytery as a leadership team to be able to look at how we move into the future in ministry and mission across Gippsland with its diversity, which is a real challenge for both of us, I think, both our denominations too.
It certainly is, and it's wonderful to have a number of cooperating parishes, and in one case a triumvirate with the Churches of Christ at Churchill.
Yes.
But what do you think? And so we watch that fig tree project with great interest, because it's not quite the circuit model, is it?
No.
Each minister still has responsibility for a congregation, but there is that sense of collaboration around some of the bigger issues, which I think is a great.
And there's also a little bit of an opportunity. Ministers will be focused on their one congregation, but there's a bit of opportunity within the teams to be able to use the gifts and graces that the ministers have in different settings instead of being locked into one particular congregation, which hasn't quite been the case, but there is more of that. I mean, this just frees it up a little bit. And as team leader of the two teams I'm part of, that includes me as well, so I can step in there and do some practical pastoral care or liturgical reading or whatever as well. So.
So there's the benefit of a little bit of fluidity with those kind of continuous relationships with familiar faces, but also still that sense of primary pastoral or liturgical responsibility of one minister for a congregation, which is a great blend, I think. Just going back to this, the cooperating parishes sort of landscape, what do you think some of the real joys of that are, and also the challenges of operating in a kind of cooperating environment at a local governance level?
I think the joys are wherever there's a communism, especially in this day and age. I think that's going to be the future of how both our denominations move forward, particularly from the Uniting Church's perspective. So always looking at collaborating with partners across and there's joys in that, as you mentioned. I think some of the challenges is that we are individual denominations with our own sense of governance and our own liturgical understanding, and I think that that can be a challenge at times, especially if, and joyfully we haven't had this in this presbytery, but certainly there's been some bumpy roads for some other cooperating parishes I've heard about where each denomination's really stuck to their own and not seeking collaboratively. But I think where there's an openness of spirit and openness for the Spirit to move and true sense of wanting to work together, we can move forward into potentially a whole new world of how we are church in the community.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is emerging. I'm very much into emerging strategy. Love it.
Yeah, well, there's that fluidity again, isn't there?
Yes.
And you said in your homily, with reference to forgiveness, that sometimes we might have to let something go.
Yes.
Perhaps that's true with ecumenism as well, and our desire to cooperate more and more, is that we'll have to let go of some things along the way if that's going to kind of bear fruit. Yeah, that's part of the manure we've got to put around the fig tree, right? So,
Yes.
And that's a huge challenge because, again, we don't like letting go of things.
yeah,
Because it tends to disrupt our norms.
yeah.
But, yeah.
And Jenny, the way you've kind of just ministered so beautifully in our context here at the cathedral through music is a great example of that organic kind of relational way of ministering together across these kind of ecclesial, membranes or boundaries. What other spaces can either of you see where we could collaborate more and be more creative, as you say, in this kind of shared endeavour and mission in a region that is diverse and dispersed and going through plenty of challenges?
I think from my perspective it's how we can collaborate through the arts, especially community art making, and how we can collaborate in community art projects that are engaging and introducing people to a faith perspective in ways that is not institutional, because that can often be a barrier to people.
Yeah.
So how can we engage? I'm thinking of things like labyrinths and other contemporary practices that we can share collaboratively in the community. The Pentecost Good Friday walk that we did 12 months ago in Pentecost was great. There were Pentecost and Good Friday, always a great opportunity to share ecumenism. And I think that can be built on within the community, where the community can see the churches working together for the benefit of the community.
Yes, there's something powerful about visible unity, isn't there, in terms of proclamation, gospel and witness.
Absolutely.
Just taking the opportunity to have a conversation about what opportunities might be there, because more than one voice can create something beautiful. And so I look forward to participating in any more opportunities that might arise that we can share in this ministry and mission to people of Sale.
As you say, Jenny, it's about relationships, isn't it? If we're willing to really come open-handed and open-hearted and get to know one another and build that trust and that sense of collegiality, then other things can flow from there.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. And as you said, the letting go, or the shedding of the skin, or other things may have to be let go, so we need to consider that too.
So just finally, guys, I heard you earlier, Peter, use the R word, the retirement word. Am I allowed to say that with the camera on? I'm just conscious that you've had a long journey together, both with a sense of ministry, including, Jenny, your long teaching career, through music, but particular and distinct ministries, but also a kind of shared journey, supporting one another in your respective vocations, and living together in a household with all the pressures and challenges and demands that come with ministry. And over the course of this series, I've had the pleasure of speaking to a couple of couples who are kind of in it together, and it's really inspiring. But just share a little bit with us, if you would, about what that's been like for you. Just kind of embodying that reality.
Big question.
It is a big question. It is a big question.
Look, it's had opportunities, and opportunities that we can work together, but also opportunities that we can find our own way in ministry as well. And the idea, of course, is to respect each other's individual pathways. And I guess two for the price of one, maybe.
And I think being able to support each other's in our individual vocations and ministry has been very important as well. And some of the situations that we've both been in, we've been independent individually. Jenny's teaching in particularly some of my mental health, working psychosocial rehab over the years, that without the support of Jenny to do that, it would have been a lot tougher than it was. So I think that's something that I treasure, that ongoing support. As for the R word, well, we'll see.
We can edit that bit out, that's all right. But seriously, ministry can be tough on relationships, can't it? It can really be challenging.
Yes.
And I think partly, Jenny, because of that, two for the price of one thing, that sometimes there's an expectation. Oh, we'll pay Peter, but Jenny, you'll come and direct the choir or whatever else, and that'll be a bonus. And that doesn't suit everyone's kind of dispensation, does it? So it can be hard to draw the boundaries that are appropriate to our particular circumstances, can't it? Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And every context that we've been in has been different in that regard.
Yeah.
I've had to find a different pathway every time.
Yeah. Well, I think your example and your obvious kind of solidarity around, mutual support and encouragement is an inspiration to others, in ministry who'll be watching and who face some of those same challenges and demands, but also share those blessings of being in it together. So thank you so much for sharing with us so openly today, and thank you so much for your wonderful collegiality in this ecumenical endeavour. It's a joy working with each of you and severally and together, and your colleagues in the presbytery, to whom we send our very best wishes. And again, Peter, for your ministry in breaking open the word for us today. We're really grateful, and we look forward to meeting other of your animated friends in due course.
And likewise from our perspective too, it's a delight to work with the collegiality, and who knows what the future will hold for both of us as we look for opportunities to do some more collaboration together. So
absolutely,
really appreciate it.
So thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure. Bless you both, and thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next time.